Okay.
All right, and we are live. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the audio figured out or the microphone figured out for Gary Cole, who is the person who we were going to have on as the guest. So we'll have to try and either get him to call in with his phone when he's able to sort that out. It seems like there were also some internet issues down where he is right now. I think he said that there was a storm and stuff dropped on him a little bit. So we'll try and get him back if we can. But if not, we'll have to reschedule with Gary, which is it's something I'm really excited about because it's would be a really cool opportunity to get a chance to hear what high-end headphones are like and how they're used for music production, because he is involved in a lot of music production for, I think it's for what, Warner Brothers, he said. I think he said yeah, so it's film scores and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to get his take on that. And I also know he owns like every high-end headphone. So I figure what I'll do for this one is I may just get Metal571's take on some of these topics, because it's been like I've had a whole bunch of questions about this kind of stuff, and I think it's an interesting question partially because of the circle of confusion that Sean Olive likes to talk about. So I think we should probably get into that, but then we'll also
we could spend the whole stream talking about that one.
Yeah, but then I think we should probably also do a little viewer Q&A when we get to that as well. Damn, I haven't seen Gary Coleman in years. This is not Gary Coleman. That would be amazing.
Oh no.
But yeah, so we'll try and get Gary on if we can, but otherwise we'll get him on for another session as well. In the meantime, so I guess my first question for Metal571 that I was going to ask Gary is, so for using headphones for mixing and mastering and that process, there seems to be a little bit of debate about like what an ideal tuning might be. You can have something like a DT1990 Pro or just any Beyerdynamic. I see you wearing Beyerdynamics there.
Oh no!
And
you're looking at the wrong idea.
The thought process for that might be like, you're able to identify all the peaks and flaws and things like that. And you're able to hear the sibilance issues and whatnot. Maybe not that one specifically, but a DT1990 would definitely give you that. And so the question is that ideal for mixing and mastering, or would something like an AKG K371 be ideal for mixing and mastering just because it's more tuned to a Harman target curve? Or is there room for both, one for the actual identification of flaws and the other for like a reference for what other people are going to hear it as? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's the whole question, isn't it? I mean, DMS probably has some kind of view on this. I know that, for example, he thinks that stuff like the DT1990 and I guess the LX are really good for picking out those kind of problems. But then again, if you compare that kind of stuff to studio monitors, at least in my experience, as in studio monitor speakers, not headphones,
like
you'll find
Field
that right, like JBLs or whatever is popular, but yeah, it doesn't sound anything like that. So it's clearly like artificially boosted on purpose. This can is easily backed up with objective measurements, but there seems to be some value. Actually, I can tell you, even though Gary's not here for this one, we'll try to get him on here. I've had some back and forth on emails, and he says he just tries to keep rotating headphones often, because you don't want to get used to one kind of sound signature, and you really want to try to pick out different. I think different headphones have different strengths, so I think that's what he does with rotating all kinds of high-end headphones in and out to check the mix. But obviously the final, I think anyone in audio engineering, which is not me by the way, knows is that the final mixing and mastering is done on speakers. So,
Right.
But it seems to be an extra tool that's really important.
I mean, I get the idea behind like using like rotating things and switching things out, because you may notice different things, depending on the headphones that you're using. But I mean, the idea of it being the final mix and master being done on speakers, I mean, I think as far as I understand, that's the way it's done as well. But I was wondering about the way that stuff is mixed these days. compared to the way that it would have been mixed in the past.
Back in my
And
day.
yeah, well, far before my
Not
day.
even like decades ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a distinct difference in how this stuff was recorded in the past, or how it was mixed in the past, where you have some recordings, the old recordings you listen to now, where like the drum track, the entirety of the drum track is like all the way on the left, and then the bass is like all the way on the right. And it just makes me wonder, like, okay, they probably weren't mixing this stuff with headphones in mind, but is that even a consideration, do you think, these days? I mean, again, this is probably a question this is what I was going to ask Gary, but yeah, is there even a consideration these days for what this stuff is going to sound like on headphones? I mean, do people care about this in recording environments, or are they mostly still trying to identify, a decent speaker setup that most people will be listening to?
Yeah, I think that's the debate. Sorry, there's some stuff going on in the background here. Um, but for me, I mean, that's kind of a big difference between the studio and audio files, and this is the debate that I try to have with
Right.
talking with people who work in audio. It's like I am here to just enjoy the final product, but when you're producing it, it's a different view as far as I understand it. So
But see, in my mind, I always find that, like, when I listen to those old recordings, in spite of the fact that I might like the music, when I listen to it on headphones, it's kind of ruined compared to
yeah,
listening to it on speakers.
the whole Beatles thing and whatever
Oh,
is
exactly. That's
always
exactly what I was
entertaining.
thinking.
I think that's what Chrono is always referring to.
Yeah.
That's funny. Although they've done a lot of decent remasters, I think that are much better than
Well, as
trying to
long as
listen
they,
to the original. Yeah,
yeah, fix the center image and all that stuff.
yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But
Um,
I think that's probably a product of that era too, that people really didn't even think about headphones very much. So when they mastered, the speakers. Oh yeah, hard panning is fine because I mean like it's not awkward if you're listening to it on speakers as much.
yeah.
So
I guess these are questions that also for Gary. Yeah, we'll have to reserve them for Gary when we finally get him on. Um, but yeah, okay. I mean, let's dive into the circle of confusion. That's that's what I wanted to get into with him as well. But so for everybody who's watching Circle of Confusion, we should probably do like a quick kind of like background on that. But
oh
basically,
yeah,
there's so many different variables in audio production that when you have a headphone tuning, like the idea of reference or standard or consistency completely goes out the window, because there is no consistency in any portion of this, and there's no standard in any portion of this. Um, and so what Sean Olive is trying to do is he's trying to, at least as far as I understand, eliminate one of these variables by getting that standardized target curve. And at the very least, we'll be able to have one fixed point there. But I don't know. What's your take on the circle of confusion?
yeah. That's a lot of my take too. But I think what but Sean is I think he's trying to come up with a similar basis for emulating Harman's own listening room. Now, again, I still haven't read the papers, and if Matt Economist was here, he would be yelling at me already. But to read them, because I'm sure he has all he seems to have rationale behind pretty much everything he's done with the research, of course, which is why it's so well respected. But yeah, I think he was trying to recreate his Harman listening room, which, as I understand it, is sort of B and K-ish. So for those who don't know, that's kind of a downslope, a light downslope, which is just what naturally happens with speakers when they're placed in a room that's not fully reverbent or fully dead. But there's also some kind of slight bass shelf. I think I'm thinking of Tile measured what his hats picked up in that JBL listening room actually, which was pretty interesting. Or Harman listening room, same thing, but. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what he picked up, and so I think he started looking into using that as a curve, which is pretty interesting because it's like you're taking the unit you're measuring the headphones on and putting it in the sound field as it would be produced by speakers, which is very interesting. And I think that's part of what the Harman research was trying to do, is to merge the quote unquote ideal listening room with what a headphone should look like to try to emulate that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's definitely trying to solve that. I mean, there will always be people probably mad also that will say, "Oh no, 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 diffuse field is the only correct one." But I think generally the shift has started to occur, and that's where we're kind of we've got something here that we're moving. It's moving. Like I after hearing lots of headphones while I was still reviewing, it seemed like the modern units were slowly shifting toward that warmer tonality slowly and
Well, the
accepting it.
last 10 years at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, even I mean, more recent than that, I feel
Mm.
like 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
they keep shifting toward warm. And it's funny because like I think I was having a conversation with Sean on Twitter just yesterday or the day before, and I was like, yeah, I had to convince myself. You watch my really old reviews, you see like me trying to say, "Oh yeah, DT880." I wanted to know what neutral was because it sure as heck wasn't what I had in my mind since like the day I was born, listening to speakers all the time,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually, of course, what I was always basing. I always base my neutral reference off of different speakers I've heard in different environments, and none of them have ever sounded that bright, anything like a K701 or a DT880. But I was like, but maybe I'm wrong, and diffuse field is always correct and whatever. And then the Harman research dropped well, it dropped before Tile showed it, but when Tile showed it, everyone was like, oh, never mind. And but for me, it was like the biggest validation in the world. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh yeah, this is kind of always what I've thought. So
It makes me kind of think about what Fang Bian said when I asked him about what he thinks of the Harman target, and he kind of looked at me with that like a puzzled look, like, "Oh yeah, the Harman target curve. Yeah, people fight about that a lot, don't they?"
oh
We're
no.
thinking like, yeah, but it does go to show that not everybody is using it necessarily as a reference, but they are ending up with stuff that's. I mean, again, the Sindara that I have here, it's basically exactly Harman 2018 without the bass shelf. That's basically what it is. So it's kind of funny that uh, tunings end up going in one direction or another, even though they might not necessarily be trying to match a given target curve, or they're not trying to make it consumer preference, and then they
Yeah,
still end up going in that direction, right?
here's an
Um,
important point that I actually only learned recently, which is the Harman target itself is not a curve of this is the absolutely correct sound. It's
mm-hmm.
the average of listener preferences.
Yeah.
And so as a result, almost by definition, the curve implies that there's going to be variation in people's preferences from it. Now, it's unlikely that people will deviate significantly from it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when I post hilarious frequency responses on Twitter, it's funny because it's like this is so like far from what would sound right, quote unquote, as evidenced by the majority of people that it's unlikely for people to like it, no matter what technicalities that you might agree with or not that even exist. So that's what it's for. But it's not a one size fits absolutely everybody. And there's
Right.
different. I think Sean, you've probably read more of the stuff than I have. I probably read some stuff at all. From what I heard, he has different like groups. There's people who
Yeah.
prefer flat bass, and there's another group that prefers a lot more bass in the target. And then there's sort of like a distribution. So
I often think I talked about this in the last stream we did with Tyler, but uh, if we're able to look at the data in a cluster analysis form and see what emerges, which groupings emerge for just from the data, naturally, and then say, okay, rather than having one target curve that it's prudent to tune things to for the widest range of people, what if we have three target curves where, or however many, right, that more closely fit with what's emerged from the data naturally. And I think that probably just involves a wider sample size maybe, but
um,
that would be something I think would probably get those three targets to be closer to what would be preferable for the groups that prefer those, right? rather than one simple standard target, because as you say, I mean it's a average that does have outliers and everything. And actually on that
Yeah.
subject, it's I mean, when trying to, for the longest time, I would look at like graphs and be like, okay, here's the target and here's what I need to do to EQ stuff. I would always use the graphs for EQ, and the ones that use the Harman target, I actually think it's a problem to try and EQ like perfectly to the Harman target, especially on some rigs, like for example the one that we're the 43 AG. This is based on Oratory's FAQ that he posted, but basically the 9K hertz dip there is not followed by the target appropriately, and the fault there is actually with the target. But the thing is, you can't create a standard, so because it varies depending on the headphone that you're using. And so this, in my mind, I mean, recognizing that the Harman target is an average and not actually a like well, let's call standard or fundamental. It's a standard, but it's average standard, but it's not like a definitive kind of target there, means that we have to be a little bit fast and loose with our EQs when it comes to matching that target, because there's definitely places where it shouldn't match. And actually on that subject, I tend to notice that a lot of headphones that don't have, like, I can't think of any open back headphones that perfectly match the Harman bass shelf. Like, I don't think that is a thing that exists.
I think the Fidelio X2 might actually be the closest.
Yeah,
which is opening
maybe.
up a major can of worms if there are audiophiles and not just consumers in the chat.
Yeah, yeah. I actually owned that headphone for a few years.
Actually, Sean really liked the X1, which I've never heard. I don't know if he's ever tried the X2, but that is something they were trying to achieve, was get some of that bass shelf in there. And I'm not totally sure how they managed to do that, because in order to do that, as far as I understand it, on an open back dynamic headphone, you have to move, first of all, the primary driver resonance very low, and then I guess induce not a mid bass shelf, but more like into the sub bass kind of shelf to try to emulate that, which is very unusual to do
But
for that kind of design.
Given that it's not common to find open back headphones with that kind of Harman bass shelf, I mean, even if they have like a bass presence or bass elevation there, they don't ever have the shelf the way that it looks. And to me, that suggests that if we are going to be trying to match that curve in some respect, we have to be EQing that, right? That's just another reason why.
Yeah,
it's a good idea to be EQing.
I think that's kind of where I went in my personal journey of things I own, as I ended up thinking, yeah, you know what? I think planars work really well, at least in the bass for me, even though some people will probably completely disagree in terms of, the unmeasurable stuff like dynamics and whatever. But one reason why I went that way is it's so easy to adjust it to whatever your preference is, because the harmonic distortion is so vanishingly low more times than not in well-designed planars that you can just take the flat bass and you apply whatever shelf you need to it.
Yeah,
and it's
gets
fine.
you there. The flip side to that, though, is that maybe there are reasons not to prefer that kind of shelf. Actually, the closest headphone that I've heard, that I've measured to that bass shelf from Harman, is the Aurorus Audio Borealis, surprisingly enough, for an open back headphone.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
It is the closest that I've ever seen, because it drops off again in the like sub bass, like all dynamic driver open back dynamic driver headphones do, but it follows the rise. Yeah, it follows the rise, down to the mid bass pretty darn closely. And it's funny because when it's going back and forth between that and the Focal Clear, the Clear, it has a similar bass presence, but it's way more. It's not as defined of a shelf. It's a little bit more gradual there, and I think at least for open back headphones, I think Zach from CMF, I think his point about not having the dip, the lower mid upper bass dip is I think there's something to that, because you do get, as much as you maybe don't get as much of the bass definition, I think you do still get a little bit of the tonal body that, for most recordings, again, this gets back to the circle of confusion, but that, most recordings probably token, right? They probably token bass frequencies around that range, and that's where you get all the tone from, rather than just having it be thump. But In any case,
Thump. Thump good. That's basically
yeah,
what people think of my reviews. Thump good. Everything else bad. Flat bass bad. Or I'm sorry,
yeah,
flat bass the only correct bass. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But actually, these days it's funny because you see a lot of headphones that just they all have again that good bass extension, but it seems like it's only like the K371 that actually, or like some of those closed-back ones that actually
Yeah.
have the bass shelf there.
I actually wanted to touch on something from the chat that I saw that was very,
Yeah, we might as well start diving into the chat here.
very
The rest of
interesting
my
here.
questions are for Gary. So
I think we can. Well, he's in the chat now, so
yeah,
hopefully
yeah.
we can have a conversation with him in the chat, even though we weren't able to get the technical difficulties ironed out in time here.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. Somebody said, "Oh my God, where was it?" Somebody said that it's something along the lines of, "Okay, well, if there's one target and everyone is tuning to it, then wouldn't that make headphones really boring?" And I think that's a very interesting. Oh, here it is. These curves may result in a trend that everyone trying to make their headphones sound the same, boring. That's a very interesting observation because what you find there is that there's the differences between I think I'd rather live in a world where we have a relatively standardized target and then really it's the differences in the materials used and the
Technical
technology of the
aspects. Yeah.
driver used and then maybe finally I can convince Dr. Olive that we should try to measure more than just the target because everyone's already hitting that, so that's no longer very interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know how to do all of that, but it's something that, hopefully we'll be able to solve eventually. But so I don't think that's actually boring at all. I think that in an ideal world, we would have headphones that often hit a standard target, and then people will, overlay on top what they know to be their preference already for how they want their music to sound. And then now the more expensive headphones just have more capability in like dynamics or soundstage or resolution or whatever those things actually end up meaning. And then to go further, in a really ideal world, we would be able to just put numbers on all of these adjectives. Audio will be solved, and we're done. And that's unfortunately not the case. Like, it's funny, I participate in a bunch of different audio communities, one of which is microphones, and you guys have probably heard of podcastage by now if you haven't. But the thing I find that's very interesting about microphones compared to headphones is that your sound demo is right there. The whole thing, like, almost all the information you need is right there in the review, and I
Hmm.
that's what I think is the problem with headphones right now is because we all have to try to describe what's happening, and then on top of that, the best we can do is show a graph, but that doesn't allow me to put numbers
And
on
just
those kind
before
of things.
anybody mentions Olive's sound demos and the ones
Oh
from
yeah.
we've been over it before, but basically you can't those don't accurately represent the headphones because of the compounding effect for the frequency
It's
response.
yeah, it's I mean it's the same thing with mic sound demos too. You're still listening through some kind of
Right.
equipment. Um the
Well, you're
only
still there's
like
one less variable though too though, right?
like Olive's gadgets, he's doing the best he can with that because it's a lot more accurate apparently to use an in-ear mic. I think it's called a
Yeah.
blocked ear canal, basically, type of listening. As long as you get the compensation for that, it's a lot more consistent. It's almost as accurate as a hat's actually from talking to
Hmm.
Matt Economist about that.
Wasn't he going to send him some different microphones? I feel like we talked about
I
that
think
at one
so.
point.
That might still happen.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see where that channel goes. But yeah, someone reiterated this point again. Some people want a pair that's brighter or warmer. We have different preferences. I don't disagree with that at all. A lot of people have labeled me as there's one target, everything else is wrong, and I don't believe in that at all, which is why I have to separate the here's what I perceive based on a common target compared to what I think people will like. Like, I can't say the DT880 is horrible for everybody because plenty of people seem to like the sound or else it wouldn't be like that popular. Even though I don't like it, it's a good headphone like in things other than frequency response for me. So it's like it's very difficult to disseminate that if that's even the right. I don't think that's the right word,
I,
but separate those aspects.
I think there's something
So,
else going on too, though, where a lot of people who buy these buy it off of a recommend, not just that one, but any headphone. They'll buy it off of a recommendation usually, or some information about it. Um, and for a lot of people, it's the first high-end headphone that they've heard, or it's the first, or the only, audiophile, let's say
There's a
audiophile
lot of
grade
that.
headphone.
Yeah.
And then that reinforces the perception that it is the best thing that, exists or whatever. It reinforces it's positive reinforcement because there's a lack of experience with all the rest of the stuff that's out there. And I think that's led to certain headphones being more popular than I think they otherwise would be. So it's on the backs of marketing or influencers like us.
Hype trains are a big deal, and I mean, obviously, corporations know this. That's why they try to get all their units out, and especially to large outlets. Ones I won't name on the stream, but people know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's basically guaranteed a positive review based on the price, basically. Ooh, expensive, must be good. And that's what we actively reject every day. But yeah, the problem is most people are not. I mean, this sounds really pretentious, but like most people have not heard anywhere near the different number of different models that we have. So we have a different perspective, and on top of that, people tend to take reviews a little too personally sometimes as well. It's like, you said something bad about a thing that I own. That's I'm not listening to anything else you say. You have to be careful. It's very nuanced. The reviewing headphones is surprisingly nuanced, which is why we keep doing these headphone shows.
Well, one of the other reasons why, I mean, I generally don't like to do negative. I mean, I like doing negative reviews because they're fun, right? In that sense, like it's like, oh my god, right? Like the PM50 that I just reviewed was a ton of fun to review because it was like, what is happening here? But the thing is, it's not fun to do. It's not fun to deal with the fact that that's now out there in the world because you said something is not good and somebody probably likes it, right? And now it's kind of ruined their day.
Nighthawk.
Right? Sure, right? So like,
you need to do that one.
Yeah. But see, like it'll ruin somebody's day, right? Or there's those aspects that are not fun about doing negative reviews, and then the other side of it is like, I would rather spend the 2 weeks or however long it takes to do the review on something that is actually enjoyable. Like I'd rather enjoy the experience rather than having to put something on and go, ugh.
Yeah,
like
I know.
I like even with the I had that with the PM50 where I walk into my test station and I was like, oh, do I really want? Oh my god, I just have to spend another day with these headphones.
Yeah, the argument is pretty simple, and I think Tile, if you follow him really closely, you'll know he did one more very, very, very last review, for some after he retired, quote unquote, and he said one of the best things in that video. I'll have to find it somewhere. It was once he'd already built his traveling van and whatever.
Yeah.
But he said the first thing you have to know about headphones is that 90 something or 99% of them are horrible. And so if we actually tried to review every headphone on Amazon, it would probably be mostly a waste of time. So usually what I try to do when I was reviewing, I would find stuff, especially at Can Jam, going to shows, which that's so last year now. And the stuff that I already thought I would like, and then review that, because if I focus on every negative headphone, there are too many. I couldn't have ever covered that many,
and especially given the amount of I'm sure you get this as well, but we get approached all the time by this is the latest and greatest wireless true, and it's like there's so many headphones out there that you're just like, I'm not gonna be touching that. Like I just can't devote time and resources to that because I know it's going to be a negative review. And I think there's an expectation though, especially with some of the way that this stuff is promoted, there's an expectation that it would be positive. There seems to be this kind of let's say influencer culture that people assume is there for us as well. And it's probably there for some reviewers, but I think, for example, I'm pretty sure that the folks who sent me the PM50 aren't going to send me anything else again.
Yeah, Biodynamics stopped talking to me after the 1770 and Amron reviews.
Yeah.
That was quite entertaining. But years and years later, go look at Oratory 1990's graph of the Amaron Home. Dude, I still get comments on that review saying mine's warm, and I'm just like, what?
I think in one of
So
their promotional videos they're talking about the T1, the whatever the latest gen of the
yeah,
T1 is, and they described it as warm. I remember
yeah,
being like,
and yeah,
"What?"
Oratory just measured that. I think that'll be in
Yeah,
his next drop, and it's got the biggest peak in the same spot.
yeah.
It's the original one. It's no different. I don't know if you've heard of T1 before. Have you actually
I heard
tried
the
that?
original. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
Because I wanted
God.
to be a hipster and not buy Sennheiser.
That's what I did. I think I actually said in my, I don't know, everyone's gonna go look at it now that I said that, and in my like original K701 review, like I don't want to be like one of the Sennheiser fanboys and buy the HD600 like everybody else.
Yeah,
Like that was like 6 or 7 years ago. No, actually I started 6 years ago, yeah. And I actually thought the K701 was a unique, different headphone that offered a lot of interesting things. So I don't regret saying that
hmm,
actually at the time, but then I bought an HD600 and then I understood what was going on. There is a reason to um,
yeah.
why some things are popular actually among the hardcore community.
Well,
So
but it is difficult to kind of like pull that apart though, and like identify which stuff is just hype and which stuff is actually popular for a reason. Because
yeah,
there's a lot of headphones out there that I mean, okay, like the M50X comes to mind, but like I think that headphone actually does. I was talking to my former boss about this back, 6 months ago when I was, or however long ago when I was. I always make fun of him for using M50Xs, and I realized that actually there's a perfectly good use application for it, and it is more that kind of like pro field recording kind of environment where
yeah,
you're
it's a
out,
tracking headphone. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, and for that, totally, it's I got no problems with that. Although these days,
Yeah.
I still think that maybe the K371 is probably the better choice. Um,
Yeah, I feel like if you
so
can get a more neutral response by modern standards in a monitor,
yeah,
then you probably should. But actually, some people are asking me about the DT770 that I'm wearing, kind of piggybacking off of that conversation. And one of the reasons I've been using this recently is actually really basic, and it's because there aren't that many closed backs, especially professional headphones. Actually, I can't even think of one right now
no,
that have velour pads on them that are really comfortable, like to wear forever. Most of them are leather, or actually, I would say most of them are fake leather, like the K371. And I had been wearing the 371 for so long, and then I switched to these, and I'm like, dude, this is kind of nice. Because actually, hilariously, I've been using this microphone, the NT1, for conference calls at work recently. I don't know if anybody noticed, but it's so overkill. But like just sitting through those with these is
you
as a
could put.
monitor is so
I
easy.
mean, velour or suede. What's your go-to there?
Wow, that's a good question. Um, I think velour is a little bit more comfortable, maybe. Although
Hmm.
they're both quite good. Um, like I can't complain about any of the suede pads for the ZMFs either at the same time. So these are
Suede
770s.
BE2s.
Someone said, "Are they 1770s?" No. Have you seen my review on that?
I still want to review those because,
It's
yeah,
fascinating because they really tried, but oh my God, I'm
but there's
sorry.
another example of headphones that are bound to be popular, and
I know.
you know, so
But anyway, what was somebody
yeah, we
was
should dive
saying?
into some of the chat. If you guys have any
Yeah.
questions for either of us, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be looking at this a little bit more closely now.
I'll give someone a good day here. Someone said, "Notice me, senpai." You've been noticed, Eudes.
Wait, is that Udis? As
Is
in
that
like,
the Eudes
yeah.
from Auroras? I don't know. Half-Life 3 confirmed.
the
No, we only got Alex.
the other day we had previous stream we had somebody named Karthik in here, and I was like, is that
Oh
Karthik?
yeah, is that the
But
one
it
from
wasn't.
Odyssey? No,
Yeah,
no, that's too bad.
yeah. Someone
Um,
says Arya versus Clear. Okay, what's your take on this?
oh, I haven't spent enough time with either, and that's totally you.
Uh,
I've actually never had an Ananda. Is that what
but
he's Ananda
you've heard
versus
these
Clear?
at like shows and stuff,
I've
right?
never had one at home, but
Right.
an Ananda is really. Oh my God, that was actually the most surprising thing I think I heard at Can Jam. I can't remember if it was this year or last year, because I've been to three of them. But
Hmm.
wow, like everything was just, there were almost no obvious peaks and dips anywhere. But this was show environment, so I bet when I
Mm.
take it home, it'll be bright again, like everything else. But
Actually, there's a lot of
it
bass there.
it
Surprising
measures
amount of
really it
bass.
measures really well. So,
I know Chrono actually downshelves the bass a little bit on it. So,
but like Ananda versus Clear is tough because I actually think both those headphones
well,
are
he
like
said
superb.
Aria Pixel
Oh,
said
did it
Aria
say
versus
Aria though?
Clear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the Arias that I've heard, and maybe they're whatever that revision was. I know we've talked about this before too.
yeah.
They've definitely been like obviously over bright for my preference, but um,
The new revisions are still like north of like upper
they're
mids,
still
more upper
north of
mids, and
Harman. Yeah, they'd certainly
yeah,
measure that way on your rig at least, but that
yeah.
doesn't mean they're not capable. Someone told me, no, no, no. If it's too bright, just EQ it because it says so much capability. So I haven't gotten a chance to do that yet. So
It does bring up an interesting question, and this is something that I was going to ask Gary as well, and we probably will. But for different technical aspects, we obviously talk about like, I mean, Sean Olive disagrees that resolution is a thing, but we talk about detail retrieval and soundstage and dynamics and all this stuff. But I was talking to Max about this like a while ago, and he was saying how Max being Max Settings, the reviewer, he was saying that he considers dynamics to be right up there with detail retrieval for like what ultimately imparts enjoyment in music listening. And I wanted to get your take on that because I know there's other people
yeah,
out there who just don't care at all about dynamics, and they're like, I only want
me.
soundstage. Well, I was gonna say actually Android, as far as I know, and don't let me put
Oh,
words in your
really?
mouth
Oh,
there,
I didn't
Android. But
know.
because I
Yeah,
asked him about the Aria and the dynamics, and he's like, well, I don't really care all that much about its lack of dynamics. And it's not like it's like
yeah,
completely devoid of dynamics, not like the Ananda and like the Dan Clark, like the Aeon stuff,
yeah.
but it's definitely not as dynamic as the Focal Clear. It doesn't have the same kind of punch, but it's like does anything. I don't know of maybe ZMF, right? Like I don't know
Yeah, yeah.
many other headphones that have that kind of punch. So for my
Yeah.
money, it is the Aria, but that is the trade-off. It's like, do you want dynamics or do you want
Some people
soundstage?
just
And
don't like the way planars present music for some reason too. There's something about them they just don't like. So
yeah,
yeah, but this is a really good question, and I've thought about this quite a bit because I'm a nerd and probably don't have anything else to think about. But it comes to audio after all the reviewing,
not
but
nerds just think about more things than normal people
you
do.
must think about more things. I like
Yeah,
that definition. That's good. I'm going to use that.
yeah,
But I think this is too subjective. Like,
mm-hmm.
um, each reviewer is going to prioritize different unmeasurable, quote unquote, because maybe someday we'll figure it out. Probably
Yeah,
will. Aspects of headphones, and I think a lot of that actually more so than the frequency response. I think technicalities depend also on maybe not more so, but I don't know. This is tough to describe. It's like the music you're listening to definitely affects it a lot. Like if you're only listening to really well recorded jazz by Chesky or whatever, then the accurate like representation of the dynamic range of the recording is so critical. Whereas if you're listening to garbage that was made within the last year, like me, then then it probably doesn't matter nearly as much. But
and sorry,
like
by dynamic range, you're meaning like softs to louds, like
yeah,
that kind of. Yeah,
yes. I mean, I guess every aspect of dynamic. I don't even remember what macro versus micro dynamics anymore.
yeah,
This is how not into dynamics I am. But for me, it's like it's more like pass fail. It's like if something is really dead to the
yeah.
point where even I can notice it. Like for some reason, the Dan Clark audio headphones have
Mm-hmm.
they actually sound like a compressor is running to some degree on the recording. It's very bizarre. But if you can get past that and you don't care about that at all, still you might really enjoy it because they have good resolution for the Aeon 2 close and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really a trade-off in all of these aspects at once that define whether something's good for the price. And I don't think you can say if it doesn't have dynamics, it bad. Now
Yeah.
you can for yourself, but as a reviewer, you have to point it out, but you also have to say, I don't worry, this is not really a problem for me, and everybody has to make that decision for themselves. It sounds a little too kumbaya, I guess. Like there's some reviewers that are like, must be this, and there are some reviewers like me where I've really tried to separate like
Hmm.
the combination of factors that someone might want to purchase something or not. It's tough. It's tough.
Right.
But anyway, a long-winded answer to that. But
Yeah, no,
yes,
that's basically what I was looking for because I tend to agree.
yeah,
And actually, it's weird because for me, like dynamics wasn't a thing that I was worried about until I started to compare dynamics and planars. Actually, and then that's one of the next questions here is how the sound different between dynamic and planar. That's what somebody asks. And I actually did a video on this, and but
plucked.
I'm yeah, right. But I'm curious as to your thoughts on the difference, Metal571.
Oh
Because
no.
actually, apparently, according to both Oratory and Metaconomist, if a transducer can produce sound waves, there, you can do whatever with either one. There's no inherent, advantage or
Yeah,
limitation there.
yeah, and that's exactly what like I think I don't remember if I asked Odyssey this in my Q&A or this came up when we interviewed Shankar, but
Hmm.
um there is like because of the way like what driver type you use can be engineered poorly very easily. You can make a horrible planar magnetic headphone, you can make a terrible electrostat, you can make an awful dynamic. Like
Hmm.
it's not necessarily implying a certain kind of sound by using a certain technology. So that's one nuance to it. But so that's why the whole inherent because the design using the planar magnetic driver is so distinct and different between Hi-Fi Men's approach and Odyssey's approach. Like they both have, if you actually take the pads off, you can see like there's just a totally different
Yeah.
design going on underneath there. They have different traces and different magnetic structures and physical design.
Asymmetrical magnets and stuff like
Yeah,
that, and,
things like
front
that.
ceiling and yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, so I don't like generalizing necessarily as much on that, but I will say that because planar, like the diaphragm itself, tends to have a lower mass than dynamic headphones, and electrostats even more so, that seems to affect our subjective impressions on what the resolution it's able to produce is. But for some reason, it also that planars tend to have more kind of ups and downs in the frequency response and narrow ranges and weird wiggly mid-range like some of the hi-fi mans do. This is some bizarre behavior you don't normally see in dynamic headphones. I guess that's about as far as I could really generalize, but I don't like to generalize on that because of that reason.
So when you hear, so I have the DMS Dianify here right now,
Mm.
or Abyss Dianify DMS mod, and that's one of those like,
There's no abyss, it's just DMS now. I like
right?
that.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, that's one of those headphones where it's like the crazy detail kind of thing, right? That I only ever get from high-end planars. Like I have not heard a dynamic driver headphone that's been able to do
Yeah.
detail to that level. And but here's the question that I'm kind of struggling with when it comes to this stuff. In spite of the fact that it's super detailed, at a certain point, I think there's a question about timbre. Like at a certain point,
Oh
it
no.
sounds so recognizably, like a nanoscale planar that I wonder, is this not necessarily? Is there like is the Venn diagram for detail and timbre overlapping a little bit too strongly? And but that's only because I haven't heard any dynamic drivers that are able to do that, and I just don't know if that, maybe it's
Yeah.
because they can't do that, So,
Yeah, I mean,
um,
there's been some interesting innovations to try to get the mass down and make the
yeah,
driver behavior very, very different. Like the HT800, of course, this is already brought up in there. That's like a ring radiator, totally
yeah.
different kind of cone shape that you wouldn't normally expect. And then the Utopia has got the super low mass. Let me make sure I get this right for the chat. Beryllium coated, not made of beryllium. At least I think that's what
No,
they're
no, no,
doing
no.
too.
The Utopia is solid beryllium
Oh,
for
the
the
Utopia is
diaphragm.
solid, really. Okay, it was
For
just
the
CMF then that was.
ZMF is beryllium coated polyethylene
Okay,
naphthalate. Yeah,
this is why I'm making sure I get this right, because someone is
but
definitely going to yell.
the big question about the focal headphones is the voice coil difference between the Alere and the Clear, because those are
Yeah,
different. And now also I don't even know what the voice coil is for the Utopia. I believe that it is actually the copper clad aluminum voice coil.
and it's
No, they're all
formless or whatever
formless.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is
they're all
also
formless. Yeah.
unusual. That's a unique design as well.
We'll
So,
have a Focal stream here on July 30th, so we'll ask them those questions.
oh, that's
We'll
great.
get
I'll
to the bottom
definitely
of
watch that one.
that. Yeah. Um,
But
yeah,
yeah, what we're saying? Oh yeah, dynamics just can't. There is something about I don't know. People will disagree about this till the end of time and just tell us that we're using the wrong amp or whatever. But I
mm,
still firmly believe that with any HD800 and Utopia, you still can't quite get to like LCD4, DMS, Abyss,
yeah.
Diana-Phi, Susvara level. And
Hmm.
beyond that, if you actually listen to things like I've heard the Shangri-La once, that is so out of control, close to the recording in terms of reproducing the tiniest nuances that like I don't know how you would even achieve that without being electrostatic. So it's pretty interesting, and I think there are some inherent limitations to each design, but
Need to get my
it
hands
just
on
but
one
the
of the.
problem is it's still subjective, and we need to figure out how to measure this, and that's a big downside.
Need to wire up people's brains.
Yeah, someone said, shouldn't impulse response just tell us about dynamics? Now you would think that, but generally what an impulse is it's just a way to look at the frequency response in the time domain. Because if you send all it is saying you send an impulse in, you should get an impulse out, and any different behavior there or quote unquote ringing is usually just a because headphones are usually minimum phase devices. So by definition, that's what that means is there's nothing else happening there. It's just when you send an impulse in, if you don't get an impulse out, then the frequency response has some kind of deviation. So
Right.
that's really all that
You're
means.
getting a snapshot of the frequency response for that range.
Yeah,
Like you would be able to
just
find that information there as
looked
well.
at in the time domain instead. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm still not sure how to measure dynamics yet.
Well, dynamics, yeah. I tend to think a lot of that stuff has to do with like driver excursion. I mean, Split Sankar was talking about as well. I mean, you got a number of parameters there that can contribute to this, and one of them is driver excursion, one of them is driver or diaphragm. Sorry, diaphragm excursion, and then the other is
like the magnetic field itself. Like I hadn't even thought
yeah,
about
the
that, but
yeah,
using a magnet only on one side means the magnetic field is uneven. So actually, the driver is going to behave differently when it's already excursed to a certain degree, which is
yeah.
very interesting. Now, how do we measure this? We need to measure this. I don't know. That's always my
It's always got to
my
measure it. Yeah.
next thought. Someone asked, why do I have a 2F instead of a 4? Yeah, I just don't want to spend that
Money.
much on headphones. Also because we need an LCD. Maybe I should come out and say this. LCD4 needs a magnesium chassis default option. I'm not talking about 4Z, but the 4 should be offered stock as magnesium. Please do this, Shankar. Maybe then I'll just think about buying one. I mean, you can
I
still order it that way, but yeah, it
really
should be
I
an
thought that the
option.
weight was due to the magnets themselves.
It
Like
it
I
is
thought.
it is a lot due to the magnets, but if you look at the LCD MX4 and the
Mm-hmm.
4Z, both of those have the full LCD4 magnetic structure actually, and with the magnesium chassis, they go down from 735 to 600 grams. So definitely the chassis is
A whole
also has a significant contribution. So
600-gram light.
yeah, 600 gram light. I mean, that's light for an Odyssey running that many
Yeah.
like crazy magnets. So I can actually sort of put up with that because my LC2 with the carbon headband weighs 580,
Yeah.
which is pretty heavy still.
I still need to get an LCD2 in, just like a LCD2F, because I haven't heard the new
Oh yeah, the
whatever.
newest one. I guess I have
Like
to send you mine now.
I haven't heard anything since 2016, to be honest, from Odyssey.
Okay.
So
Well, that was when they made their major revisions,
that's
so
what I'm
it's
saying.
probably
Yeah.
when it was
Yeah.
decent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of people think that like I've always been an Odyssey fan and whatever. And you know, the whole it actually scared me away for the longest time. The pre 2016s and all the driver failures and all that stuff. I think they've always had. I don't know if they've always had the 3-year warranty. I hope so. But
Mm.
once I learned about that, and then their revision in 2016, which I knew sounded decent, going forward, then I started looking at them, and that's how I got into that brand anyway. But
Right.
yeah, I haven't always been the fan that I am now. But
Here is I got a good question from the chat here. So do you think headphones have much greater peaks and valleys than quote unquote good speakers,
Oh, I saw that.
which interact with individual hearing in a weird way, which equals much different perceptions? What do you think about that?
I think that's accurate, and it's funny, quite blatant remark. I think it was what's his name, No Audio File on Twitter was like, yeah, headphones are irredeemable garbage. And you know what's funny about that is, I mean, compared to the average speaker, it certainly feels that way. Like you don't see these, like no one's gonna buy a speaker that, well, at least I don't think, that's gonna have like a 10 dB dip somewhere that's
Right.
like really screwed up. Like generally, I
But
don't find speakers deviate like that in the same way. So,
but
but I don't know.
that's always measured in front of the speaker. The question
Mm.
would be, how does this measure at the eardrum? How does the flat measure? How does the quote unquote good speaker measure at the eardrum?
I
At
that
various distances in certain environments, right?
well, I mean, as far as I know, when you like, they wouldn't make the standard of measuring a speaker head
No.
on with a regular microphone that way if it didn't correlate to what we hear. But I've never actually seen that. You mentioned I've never actually seen a comparison between like a hat's measuring speakers and the same thing being measured with just a microphone in the near field like that. But I imagine they're directly correlated. But I never actually looked into that.
But see, that's where like, if you were to see any peaks and dips like you do with headphones, I think that's the only place where you would see it, as on a measurement taken at the eardrum from speakers,
I don't know
right?
about that. I don't know. Skorg says I've never heard a Zoo audio speaker, so I'm sure there are some bad speakers out there. Never mind. Good
No,
point.
but he said a good measuring speaker,
There's
right?
always an
Like
exception.
presumably a good
Yeah,
measuring speaker, like,
I don't think measuring the effect of it. Well, okay, in a room, room has a massive impact. That
Mhm.
is definitely something that will cause that problem. But assuming you have a good room,
Mhm.
then yeah, I generally agree that speakers sound more even, I
Mhm.
think. And headphones are all over the place. They really are all over the place. Like look at cheap IEMs. Oh Lord.
Even some expensive IEMs.
Yeah, even some expensive. Yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, I think I agree with the point in general.
Mhm.
But again, it's like any generalization. There's going to be exceptions.
Yeah. Um, Maybe, I mean, I don't know if it has to do with the actual physical size of the transducer, but at the same time, I mean,
I think it's something to like also the whole I don't I'm not into speaker design as much as probably some people in the chat, but yeah, the
I was
two
gonna say the
two versus
coupling.
three way and
Oh
I just
yeah,
mean in terms of
yeah,
speakers, yeah, all that can
yeah.
cause all kinds of problems. That gets really complicated to design properly, so
Hmm.
but that's
Yeah.
about all I know about that. So
That's the next frontier, at least for me, is getting into near field speakers at some point.
just get a
But it's like,
305 done.
but the problem is, it's like such a small, little. I mean, you guys can't see it because it's behind the camera, but this is literally a hallway. So
Oh, no.
getting any type of decent speaker in a hallway is still going to sound like a hallway.
Yeah, my living room has a stupid amount of reverb. I had to
Yeah.
put acoustic panels all over the place, and even then, it's like nowhere near as good as it. It's just I would have to invest so much time and
Yeah.
money into getting it right. That's why I don't spend too much on speakers. But I kind of do want to also own near fields, and I was telling Sean that the other day. It's like I should probably actually have because it makes a very interesting test to compare near fields directly to headphones and
Mm.
using speakers as a way to reset your brain against headphones rather than like an HT 650 or whatever to reset your brain. I think that's a aspect that I haven't seen other
I
reviewers
think
take yet.
I think it's a great idea.
So,
That's one of the reasons why I want to get into this.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah. All right, let's see what else we got here. Lots of questions this time. Um, Someone asked about.
THX Panda.
I mean, I haven't heard it, but it doesn't. The
I
frequency
haven't
response
either.
does not look promising.
Oh wait, no, that's a lie. I have heard it, but only briefly at Can Jam, so I don't know if it was a prototype or not, but yeah, a lot of mid to upper bass, just like kind of the graph shows, and like didn't sound like it had much air. It was just kind of dull and mid or upper bassy. So I don't know. Maybe at least it doesn't have any hiss, like the Mobius does to some degree. But I
Mhm.
have no idea. I don't know much else beyond that.
What is the hardest thing for you or for headphone reviewers like us to put into words when evaluating headphones?
Wow. Um, I still cannot like every time it kills me every time Sean asks like what define detail. Oh my God, it's just like it's so difficult to do that without being like take headphone X, Y, and Z. it's, it's hard to explain what that means. otherwise, because people are
This
not likely to believe it.
So there's a wonderful little thought experiment from analytic philosophy called it's Frank Jackson's "What Mary Didn't Know," and the idea is just to paraphrase it a little bit, but basically the idea is you put somebody in a completely black room, like dark room, there was no lights or anything like that, and so this person can't see anything. I mean, it's supposed to be black and white, but imagine you can't see anything, and then you give that person all the information about color and light, and tell them everything that they can possibly, all the scientific information about all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And until they walk outside of that room, open the door, and see the world for the first time, they're still missing an important component to knowledge of what that is. And all it takes is for that experience to be there for that person to go, oh, now I have a new kind of knowledge here. And I think the same thing is probably true for detail. I mean, we can scrutinize frequency response and graphs to our heart's content, but until you hear an LCD4 or Svara or a the Abyss, whichever ones they are, you're not going to get the full picture there. And so it's just a matter of having that experience, and then it becomes so obvious what it is, right, as far as its experience goes, or the experience of it goes, right, and what it is like to hear that stuff. So anyways, that's me waxing philosophical about
No, that's great. I didn't know. This actually helps. That's not the kind of perspective I've heard from other reviewers, but I'm glad there's actually somebody who is so well to explain like what some of these unmeasurable things are. But what's but I just wanted to add to that you don't have to buy like Susvara to really understand it. I mean, I know for me it was pretty clear the first time I heard an HD 600 was actually when I understood what was happening here and that there was something else going on. Because what was interesting is that at that time I had an SRH 440, which actually sort of has a similar frequency response, especially in the mids. I think it was a little bit brighter in the highs, but and I was comparing those two back and forth, and I'm like, it doesn't sound like there's that much more treble on each one of these. It's just like it's a different texture and presentation altogether between these, and that's what I chased from that point on. It was so different. So and then I didn't realize it got even better than that to some ridiculous level. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like the easiest, most obvious examples in the like crazy high end stuff.
7506 versus any of that stuff is just so different.
But for me, actually, the most difficult thing to communicate or explain, that was the question, right? Put into words.
Yeah.
There's two things. One of them is apart from the whole detail and resolution thing, but one of them is texture, which I think is sort of a component of detail. When we talk about texture, it's really like, at least in my mind, I mean, that's sort of just a kind of bullshit audiophile term that doesn't have any correlation to anything in the what's actually going on physically. But as far as the experience is concerned, you can hear certain elements of, if you're hearing an acoustic guitar or you're hearing some element of the music, it's just a component there of the detail retrieval that I think comes through better or worse, depending on how good the texture is. So for example, you hear a viola bow or violin bow or cello bow going across the string. Well, if you hear that in real life, you can actually hear the tension of the string, and you can hear how, like, the weight of the bow and the pressure they're putting on that. And on bad headphones, you can't hear that, but on good headphones, you can, or at least you can't hear it as well on poor headphones. And so to me, that's a difficult one. I mean, see, I'm struggling with it right now to put into words. The other one that I really struggle to put into words is timbre, because I think
still don't really understand what the official definition of that is.
But see, I don't think there is one. There isn't really an official definition of any of this stuff. But I've always thought of it as, and I was talking with Chrono about this as well, but I think there's material-related timbre, and then there's frequency response-related timbre. And whether or not something sounds natural or unnatural can be attributed to both of those things, I think.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I'm at right now, and I could be persuaded otherwise that maybe it is all just frequency response. It
could still be. It's just that we have to look at it a certain way, and that's something that I think gets thrown out the window too often. It's still possible. Yeah.
All right. Here's another question for you. When will you bite the bullet and buy the M9?
Oh no, yeah, I saw that earlier. Yeah, I really freaked out over that when I heard it at CanJam. I'm like, an IM can do this? What? Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I don't know. I guess I'm mega BA fan now, which is
Speaking of timbre,
derogatory. Yeah, I know exactly.
yeah.
But even just going back to timbre briefly here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Um, uh, yeah, now that we've kind of already circled back around just by talking about that IEM. Um, so, if for me, when I started, timbre was always what is the shape of of like a region of the frequency response, because that's going to affect, which overtones are emphasized or
Mm,
underemphasized of something.
yeah.
So, yeah, like people are saying tone color is the unscientific definition, and the color is related to um, kind of the shape of the mid. So for me, I would always say the mid-range timbre is a certain way. It's not timbre in the sense that these two things have exactly the same frequency response, but the way they present instruments is different, which is another kind of timbre that I think
Yeah.
is being used more often now. But like if the mid range is like for the probably the most obvious would probably be something like a K701 where the whole upper mid peak is shifted down to peak at like around 2 to 2.5 K when it's
Yeah.
supposed to peak at rear resonance at around 3.5 K. Like that sort of thing throws off the timbre of instruments and
So this is
realism.
like what you're describing here, sort of like a wide analysis of certain frequency response ranges, and
Right,
seeing,
yes.
yeah,
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 general overall shape. And so when I talk about something being neutral, it's more, I think, important that the general overall shape of the curve is what it should be, and then it gets subjective where how much mid-range you want,
hmm,
not where a random peak should be or shifting it.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
not as debatable, I don't think, as our ear shapes are more similar than different in terms of that general shape.
But I mean,
But
that's
anyway, that went way
something.
too far. But yeah, that's
Well,
kind
no,
of
but I mean that it
what I
brings up
think.
this the subject of the way that we analyze frequency response curves, which I do think by and large is done incorrectly by most people. I mean, just throwing that out there, but like I tend to think if people
We
see,
are
you know,
constantly learning, and we've been doing
yeah,
this for a while too,
yeah,
like how to
yeah,
read the graphs. And something funny, and Eudes will probably, if he's still here, he'll probably get offended by me saying this, but um, with the Borealis, when you measure that thing, everyone is like, "Oh, the timbre is exactly the same as an HD 600 or whatever, or actually 580." Sorry, that's what
mm.
they claimed. And what was funny was that I'm not sure. I guess you didn't release that graph yet, but you showed me ahead of time. I'm
No,
sure
it's
you will.
public. It's
Oh, it is
posted on the
public.
web.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, if you look at it, there's a peak at like 5K or five and a
yep,
half
five point
K.
five. Yep.
That's exactly the same spot where the HD 580 tends to have a peak in the 600.
Yeah.
And so like the upper mid, it's not as shouty around 3.5K with the Borealis looking at the graph, but it has a peak in the same general spot, but small in the same way that a like 600 series Sennheiser does. So it almost is like, ha, look, timbre.
Well,
It's more
it's
than that, I
it's
know, but it
it's
was just
funny
kind of
that
funny.
you mentioned this because so I'm actually about to release my Borealis review. Should be this weekend actually, the video at least. And I actually find that the timbre is surprisingly the weakest point. It's
Oh
still
no.
fine, but I actually like see that's the thing is and it's only because I was expecting the timbre to be like great because of this comparison with the 580 and like
Right.
being a timbre focused headphone like
580 replacement.
yeah or like step up from
It's a little different than that, to say the least.
but I do find that and this is where timbre confuses me still because I tend to think that while it may have excellent frequency response related timbre or tonal balance related timbre, I tend to think the shortcoming is in the material related timbre. But again, maybe that's just me not analyzing the frequency response well enough to be able to find the.
Someone just said "rip Eudes." That's terrible.
No, but see, that's the thing is like of the category, timbre kings, I would not put the Borealis among them. That's basically my analysis. It's not like it's definitely more natural and agreeable sounding than many other headphones for timbre. It's just not at
Yeah.
the top, echelon there with ZMF and whatever else, right?
Yeah, for
580.
me, I just sort of laugh at it because I'm obviously not very picky because as people will point out in the chat, I love planars because I love the resolution and some of the sound, like open planars,
Yeah.
especially the resolution and sound stages are capable of producing is really, really excellent, and there are not many dynamics at that higher level that can compete with the higher level planars, for example. But
Yeah.
yeah, some people just don't like whatever that is about the planar sound, quote unquote. So, but I can also understand that. It's just, yeah, it's preferences. I don't know what it is. I know Chrono and I are like mega team LCD2F here, so, and you're like ZMF fan number one. No, not really. I mean, you like Hi-Fi Man and
I
ZMF
yeah.
and Focal, so like, yeah. I mean,
I don't
maybe you're
have
not as picky
as
as I thought in
well.
terms of
See,
that.
like I'm not as like brand. Like I don't have like
Yeah,
a
that's probably the most important thing. I try to make this point often. Every headphone brand has good and terrible models. Like it doesn't even matter. And if a reviewer is always reviewing every product from one brand as good, something seems not quite right about that.
yeah.
Um, so, but anyway, yes,
Yeah.
it's good not to be picky. Like I can give plenty of examples from companies that people have accused me of being of working for, like the LCD MX4 really underwhelming. The LCD 4Z total waste of money. If you could spend the same again LCD 4, LCD 24 is like I can't. It's horrendous. I don't understand. It was worse than my LCD 2 when I tried it. I liked it less. Um, and then what's the other one?
Well, the
Sennheiser.
LCDX is
The
frequency
LCDX has a
response.
terrible frequency. Like at the point where it's at right now, the LCDX is like what I would call unacceptable. Like you cannot deviate to that degree from a normal shape of a curve at that price. Like
Yeah.
you
Where the
can't.
primary
That's
ear
not
resonance is,
good.
you have to have
Yeah,
something
it's
there. Yeah.
it's wrong. So yeah, so there you go. So now
If any,
Sennheiser's left. So now people are gonna ask about that. Yeah. No, try
Actually,
some of
somebody was
Sennheiser's
asking
lower
about
end
that.
stuff is
Yeah.
pretty bad. Some of it has some really serious resonances and
Some of their high end
problems.
stuff's pretty bad too.
Oh no, don't get me started on the 820 again. That was a ridiculous conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it depends. Every brand has, ups and downs. So
Yeah. Um, you used to own the Atticus, right? From
yeah,
ZMF.
for a while. So
What?
was someone are you
Oh,
wondering
so
why
somebody
I
was asking
sold
anybody
or
own the
something?
own the
Oh,
Atticus. Yeah, yeah. But I
yeah,
mean,
I
I remember
did.
you were telling me about how you found the Auteur slammed a bit harder than the Atticus actually,
Oh yeah,
or
for
not the Auteur,
sure.
sorry, the Icon.
Oh, the
Yeah,
icon. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the biocellulose, maybe, or maybe it's all in my head because everybody says, "Oh yeah, biocellulose slam," like
Oh,
automatic.
right. So you're connecting those two. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But I
that's from
really,
Fostex. That's the Fostex kind of
yeah,
hangover, right?
I
So
really did think though that the icon, like that driver that it uses in the icon, the Auteur is, it does have seemingly more impact though, because the ALS is a little softer, and the Atticus, especially the Cherry Atticus that
hmm
I reviewed originally, and I really loved the way that presented its treble, other than some of the really narrow peakiness of it, but it was really weak on dynamics. And the camphor version was better, but the treble suffered like a loss of resolution. So like, I think if I were to buy another ZMF, I'd make sure I get the same wood.
right.
Now I'm at that point. That's one of the reasons why I sold it. Actually, it was just because he moved to what's it called? Yeah, he moved to camphor as standard for the
hmm
closed backs. I used to have an option between oh no, people are gonna kill me for pronouncing this wrong. Paddock or paddock or whatever he calls it.
I think you said it right. Yeah.
I
Paddock.
last time I googled it, it's Paddock, but I think
Yeah.
actually Zach calls it paddock or something, so I don't even know anymore. But but yeah, so the wood has a significant impact, it seems. In fact, even the ALS that I heard at Can Jam, which was camphor, I think the camphor burl one, sounded like it was a little peakier around 6K. And I asked Zach about that offhand later, and he was like, "Yeah, you know what? The like reflections from the wood is going to change, based on I think the hardness of it." So It's possible that maybe we should have stuck with Sapele, or if that's even the right pronunciation.
That's the next one. I see. Mine's easy. Mine's just silkwood.
So that no, you're lucky. You're good. That is a
Yeah,
stock wood, right, for the
it
Verite.
is.
Okay.
Yeah, but see,
Yeah.
that's the thing is
But
because
anyway,
I also didn't know. Well, the main reason I picked it is because I want to keep the weight down because I'm a necklet. But
yeah,
I also like
that thing is so light for being a wood
it is.
headphone.
It is
It's
very
crazy.
light. Yeah. But I also think like the question about how the different woods impact the sound is it's an interesting one because like you can experience it, you can hear it. I imagine if you go back and forth, you can tell. But that's another one where it's like, where does that show up in the measurements?
Yeah.
And I'm not really. And I know we talked to Zach about this in the stream we did with with him, but
Yeah,
it's definitely one where I'm like not really
yeah, I
sure.
think he said they're pretty close actually measuring, but
Yeah.
when you actually put them on, and I think this happens with the pads even more so actually. The pad measurements really don't look significantly different many times, but like the
Oh, I
material
know.
they're made out of just affects so much, and
And
it's
like these
weird.
ones, the BE, sorry, like the not the suede
BE2 suede?
BE2s. Yeah, no,
Oh,
BE2 perf suede. So
oh,
okay,
okay,
not the
okay.
suede versions of this. I have the other BE2s, but they look almost identical to the Verite leather flat pads. The
Yeah,
only difference is that they bulge a little bit more on the BE2, and the frequency response is so different on them. And actually, it's funny because I was so yesterday I spent the whole day pad swapping. No, I spent the whole day pad swapping on the Aurora Audio Borealis.
oh, okay, okay.
Just because it was like I wanted to see how do these all translate to different headphones, because I know what they all sound like with the Verite, and it's crazy that the degree of difference that pad swapping makes. Like uh,
Yeah,
it's extreme. But then on top of it, what I found with the Borealis is that I actually like the stock pads the best. It's like oftentimes, I mean, obviously because they tuned it with that, right? But
somebody designed something.
yeah, exactly. But it's oftentimes when you're pad swapping, you go full circle and you realize that what the engineer shipped the headphones with the one, like they did that for a reason, usually. But
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
really digging the perf suedes here on the Verite Open for both for comfort reasons, but I think it's just easier to EQ.
Wait, which perf suede do you have now?
Sorry,
The
the BE2
Oh,
perf
B2
suedes.
perf
Right?
suede.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
still
yeah,
I'd still like to try the Verite suede.
yeah. That was
Solid.
the one where
Yeah.
when I switched, I heard one of my viewers Verite opens at a local meet before the craziness of Corona,
Mm.
and like when I put it on with and this happened again at Hand Jam too. When I put it on with the stock lambskin Verite perfs, I was just like, this is so boring and dead. And the trouble, I cannot get into the Verite Open with the lambskins. But
Hmm.
he was like, no, 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 try the suede Verite pads. And apparently those are like Zach doesn't recommend those because I think they roll off the base or something. I don't know if that's
Oh,
actually
okay.
true or not, but man, just a regular suede changeover, there's so much better.
Hmm.
That's really crazy, the difference between the material. But
Yeah.
yep, that definitely happens.
See, it's funny you
Somebody,
mention that because like
yeah,
I don't mind the leather Verite pads. I know Max doesn't like them either, but
yeah,
I
they
kind
sound too
of
dead. I don't know what it is. It just
I
doesn't sound
guess
like 2000 something dollars. That's
I
my
guess
biggest.
because I'm like when I use those I EQ them as well a little bit,
Oh,
so
okay.
maybe that. But I
Yeah,
found that
without it,
like
it's weird.
the I found that sort of the speed comes through a bit better when they're
Hmm.
you know
Yeah, I haven't
closer.
had a chance to mess with that, or have a
Yeah.
Verite open at home yet either. But come on, Zach. But
Come on, Zach. Just look
we're
directly
always
at the camera.
we're always bugging Zach.
No, I know.
The reason why you guys don't see more ZMFs just across the internet in general is just because they're already in crunch time trying to produce these headphones by hand for everybody, and it's not a lot of
I
units
I
to
want
go around, I
to
don't think.
buy a new ZMF headphone just so I can have the joy of looking at that list again.
Yeah, it'll take you like 2 or 3 months probably at this point because it's just so much happening over there. Somebody said, what did somebody say that was
LCD-X
interesting?
tuning worse than
Yeah,
LCD2F.
that's actually exactly what I was gonna. And somebody asked about the Penrose earlier too, which I wanted to talk about briefly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the LCD, yes, LCD-X tuning is
Well,
worse than the
I want to
2F.
say it probably depends. I mean, there's going to be some variation with those as well. I'm not totally
Probably.
sure, because I know like this version that I have here, which was the one that was, let's say, the 2020, early 2020 version. Whenever that happened with the mesh part, that one I think measures worse than the LCD2F, but I don't know about the others.
Yeah, when it was new, like some of the graphs that Tile has up don't look that bad at all. Actually look pretty
Hmm.
similar to like actually I don't know if this is a secret or not by now, but the LCDX has got the LCD3 magnets in it, which is part of the reason probably why it sounds like about the same resolution. Just a very different diaphragm, which
Hmm.
makes some sense
Yeah.
because it was meant to be a very high efficiency but play in that $2,000-ish arena. So, but yeah, I don't know what happened, but the way it measures now doesn't seem right
Right.
at all to me, which is bizarre. I mean, the 2F doesn't have a great frequency response either. It still needs quite a bit more ear resonance, but man, the LCDX is really just it's just a flat line instead of where it's supposed to peak.
Yeah.
The GX is quite good though. I'm not sure what happened there. It's a lot closer. There's not as much weird 6K peak happening. It's a little warm on the top end though, which is different. Because usually a lot of the Odysseys actually have like a 10K peak
Yeah.
now,
Well, that's
or
what I
or a lot
noticed
of air
about it.
boost, and that's not really the
Yeah.
case on that one. So I think that one's probably the closest to
Hmm.
right. But yeah,
So,
you're still, the whole single-sided planar thing. And then just to touch on the Penrose, those who don't know, as far as I'm aware, it's basically they've taken the Mobius platform, but they have different electronics happening. So um, you lose the head tracking, you lose virtual surround, and you lose the nice codec. So it only has SBC AAC, and that's it for Bluetooth. But you gain near zero latency, 2.4 gigahertz wireless for
oh,
PC,
really?
PS5, yeah, and
Oh, that's brilliant.
Xbox, and then it's 249, which is ridiculous because that's like almost the same exact price point that people like SteelSeries and Astro try to play in. So if they pull this off right, we might have one of the best, maybe the best sounding by far. I mean, compared to other gaming headsets,
I
best
didn't
sounding by
realize.
far wireless
Yeah, I didn't
wireless
realize it was
headset.
still wireless because I always thought that was because to me, like the Mobius as a gaming headphone doesn't make as much sense
It's really the
because
Mobius is really a USB. It's really a USB device
yeah,
for a computer or whatever. It's not wireless. Bluetooth is a nice extra, and I'm glad they have LDAC
yeah,
on there, which is great. That's most of the way I use mine, which is up here somewhere. That's a vintage 30. But I still use that a lot in Bluetooth. But with the new one, it's focused a lot more on yeah, gaming and actually using it with consoles and whatnot, which is great because that's something that's really missing. One of
hmm
my friends was looking for a wireless gaming headset just the other like month, and I was like, I looked through everything, and I was like, I can't find anything that might be worth buying. Maybe I think Sennheiser has one, but there are all kinds of software problems or something with it. So we'll see
the
what happens. It's interesting.
the other thing with that too, though, is that before they released this, they had been OEMing for HyperX with the Orbit. I'm sorry, OEMing is maybe not the right
Right.
term, but it was the Orbit and the Orbit S, and those ones were both. So it was the interesting thing. It's like they. I looked at what was going on with them. They both made more sense for gaming, and they were both less expensive. And so then I thought to myself, why would you buy the Mobius for gaming?
Yeah, I
And so
think if you're
now,
only going to use it for gaming and you need the virtual surround, but not. Let's see. Yeah,
they didn't
because
have the head
you
tracking in
lose
one of them.
Bluetooth completely.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
with both of those. Yeah. So
yeah,
if you're
yeah.
only using it for gaming, wired, then yeah, you can
Right.
save money on those. We have so many different Mobius-based sort of
There's
platform
four
devices
now.
now. It's four
Yeah,
now. Yeah, right.
yeah.
But
Um,
Penrose is cool
But
because
so that to
true
me is
wireless
really exciting if it's
gaming
truly
headset.
wireless with zero
Yeah.
latency, like
Yep.
they have with these like mice, the Logitech mice that they have.
Right. Yeah.
The
It's
zero
very
latency is
low at
actually
least. It's less than
yeah,
aptX LL. I think Karthik was posting about it on Headfi. There's a big Headfi thread on the Penrose where they pretty much answer every question people have, which is really
yeah.
crazy. A classic Odyssey support there.
That's what you
So
gotta love about Odyssey. I mean, you say we're
they
critical of
genuinely love this stuff. They
yeah,
really
yeah,
are total headphone nerds in the
yeah,
same way us reviewers are,
hmm
which is fun. So
yeah. I saw a few more. Let's answer a few more questions here, and then probably call it a day. But I saw one here recently that I was I think I may have lost it. Any news in the budget ZMF can? No, I think you'll hear news from him before you'll hear news from me.
Yeah, same thing with me.
Zach. Yeah. Let's see.
CMF Argon mod. That would be really funny if they modded it again after Argon.
Modding a modded headphone.
Yeah, that sounds really funny.
Yeah.
DT770 is underrated. That's an interesting opinion because actually it's sort of complicated. I don't know if I'd ever really talked in detail about the 770 versus the 371 in my review, but it certainly has a wider soundstage, but man, the frequency response is still really screwed up. Like oratory measuring it pretty much covers that.
I found the question that I had lost. In the context of the comment about the Borealis, what do you think is the timbre king? So in my mind, that is there's a straightforward answer to that. It's the ZMF Auteur. That to me is the timbre king. But I know there's people out there who are going to be up in arms and suddenly hate me because I didn't say the 580, because I know there's a lot of people who really like that for timbre. But as Metal just pointed out, that may just be the 5.5 kHz.
Some similarity in the frequency response.
Yeah. I don't know. What's your take on the timbre king?
Oh man, I really don't like to talk about timbre much, but I kind of agree that it's somewhere between. I feel like it's almost a tie if we just throw out everything else about the headphone and just talk about timbre. Yeah, I think it's something like the 580 and Auteur. I would tend to agree. For some reason, I really like the way the A-list presents. Like something about that driver, the TPE driver, I really like. Like the Icon and the Auteur sound a little too inherently aggressive in the mids, I think. They sound shouty, but not necessarily in a frequency response way as much as just they really just want to come out and the music just wants to jump out of them. That sounds so stupid and the most audiophile thing I think I've said on this stream, but they definitely have that sort of a tendency to them, which is very unique, but I think I like the more laid back A-list. I wish we had an A-list with the slam of the biocellulose. That was what I think I told Zach. Ultimately, I was like, I want A-list is so close. Just improve the dynamics in the bass. That was pretty much what I told him, I think.
I still need to get one of those in for...
Oh, and the soundstage is really not that good either, actually. That was a little disappointing. That's one of the reasons why, like, even though it sounds great with no EQ at all, the A-list is really, really good in terms of that. Like what the LC2 was capable of doing that I already owned after EQ was like, I can't choose the ZMF over it because of this. In my experience, that was kind of my. But oh man, it's so enjoyable. You definitely need one of those.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that might be the next one that I end up. Oh no, I still need to Verite closed, so I can't. Yeah.
Oh
There's too many.
You can't own the open and not the closed. It also has to be purple.
Tyler's. I don't even see Tyler in the chat here. He's.
I'm surprised. Well, if he was here, he would say something now.
Yeah, I think he's out with his family right now.
Okay.
Clear versus Aeolus versus Auteur, or is this Clear versus Aeolus / Auteur? I think it's one or the other. This is like
distinct kind of sound.
Yeah,
in the treble,
in my mind, this is like one of the most requested comparisons, because especially the Clear against the Auteur, and I think this is just my sense of having heard both, having owned the Auteur for a long time. The Clear is better at detail. You get a little better detail retrieval there. The Auteur is way better at soundstage, and they both have good slam. I think that the Clear is a little bit more punchy. And also, I think the Auteur does a better job. Okay, this is, again, going to sound a little spicy, but I think the Auteur does a better job of the mid-treble, like around, because it doesn't have that same 6K hertz peak that the Clear does. But I kind of like the way the Clear handles the bass a little bit more. And then the mid-range, I mean, you gotta love the ZMF mid-range there, but the Clear's mid-range for the frequency response is also really good. Like it's really smooth, and it follows the primary ear resonance there almost perfectly. It's just like the upper mid treble area is a bit wonky on the clear, and it's not as wonky on the Auteur. So really, I think it comes down to whether or not you value soundstage or detail. If you value detail, it's the clear. If you value soundstage, it's the Auteur. And obviously, timbre is the Auteur.
Yeah, and I think the Auteur's mids are just a little too aggressive, where the Clear's mids
That's
are just
what I'm saying. Yeah.
yeah, they're much smoother. But then again, people want their vocals to be more forward sometimes too. So yeah, that's so I think that part's too subjective. Like the Auteur, it's good. I reviewed it well, but like personally, it's just too much happening in the mids and the highs, just slightly though. So that's much more preference on that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I find the Auteur doesn't have that same kind of grittiness for the S's and T's and stuff like that.
There's something like the whole metallic timbre thing.
Yeah,
just sort of a meme now. Not even just people just say it all the time because it's what is it, aluminum magnesium driver, right?
It is, yeah. So think about metal drivers
literally,
equals metal, metallic timbre.
But
That's where that came from. It has to be.
I guess so, but it really does sound like metallic is usually the adjective we use when we have really narrow peaks in like specific spots in the treble, which just kind of sound a little bit strange, but also unique, and you might like it. I don't know. It depends. Yeah. Actually, Clear is good though. I like Clear. I didn't know that the Auteur had a better soundstage. I never compared those. Back to back. That's pretty interesting.
Definitely big soundstage on the Auteur. Well, I say big. Like at times it was almost like too far away from me. Like I wanted it to be more. But I guess maybe, and also the pads change everything with that too. So it's
man, plastic. There's a word I hate.
Plasticky. That's Max's term. He's always talking about plasticky timbre.
I think Ishka used that all the time when he was still reviewing too. That's something to do with like the attack and decay. I think actually never really understood what was happening there. Yeah.
Anyways, okay. Well, let's do one more question from each of us here. How's the ranking list going? When's it going live?
Why are you doing a ranking list? I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm doing a ranking list. I've actually. It's a bit of a challenge because it seems like there's no clear and easy way to just sort of represent this stuff because of what we talked about earlier, but with people having different preferences for like dynamics versus detail versus soundstage, etc.
So
so what I'm working on right now is kind of like a little matrix where people can select their preferences and then they can rank their priorities, and then it spits out the list that makes the most sense for those priorities. At least for the technical stuff. For frequency response, it's going to be pretty a little more similar to Crin's kind of tiered list there. Because really, like, I have to assume that people aren't going to be EQing. So I'm having two lists, kind of. One is the tiered kind of like, just like here's what is good measuring versus the bottom is like the PM50 and the top is like this is far
Nighthawk at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly, right.
That might actually be worse.
Yeah, so but then there's the my preference list, which does include EQ, and then it's where all those technical aspects come through a little bit more strongly.
Yeah, and I will personally approve the list before it goes. I'm just kidding. No.
It's
I people have asked me to do that too, and I was just like, dude, there's so many factors to keep in mind that it would just be I feel like I would be constantly adjusting it too and changing my mind. Like it's really hard to make a list. So the best that I could really do is I used to make a yearly video that was like, here's the best things I've heard, this year, or what I think is good to buy as of this year in these general price ranges. But yeah, ranking things like this goes just barely above that. That's so much work, and I would be impressed if when you come out with that.
You have to have like.
It's tough.
I mean, we're starting we got all the headphones here, so we're.
Oh, that's the other thing. I have to have all the headphones on hand all at the same time to directly compare them, because auditory memory is bad, and every time I have to refer to that, I have to give a huge disclaimer because it could be completely wrong. That happened many times. Probably the most obvious was 598 versus HD600 soundstage.
Oh, right. Yeah.
A lot of people did not believe that the 600 had a worse soundstage, but it really does have a less wide one.
Yeah. I just want to add here, MusicX asks or says, please add proper measurements to your ranking. Yeah, they'll be there. So whenever I have measured a headphone and it's in the ranking, I will be there'll be a way you can
That's
access
awesome.
that for sure.
Gross,
Yep.
everything.
It's so fascinating what I'm learning as a result of like learning about the headphones as a result of using this measurement system, and just how that translates when you are doing EQ with it, right? So like that's the thing, is like you can learn something from the graph, but then when you're making your adjustments and your EQs, you realize so much more there's so much more to the headphones tuning than you ever thought was possible or was required for it.
Yeah,
Um,
I tend to find that most headphones seem to have peaks in similar locations, but the
yeah,
problem is picking out the ones that have it in unusual spots, like
yeah,
7K or 5K. That's hard by ear.
yeah,
I
yeah.
really have trouble with that, and so for the
5K
longest time, I had
is
no idea that for some reason the 6X0s, a lot of their upper
yeah.
mid shoutiness was not the 3K, it was more of the 5K
Hmm.
as well, working with it. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I have one final question here that we're going to end the stream on, and it's the most important question for Metal571 that
I
he's
think I
ever
know
been
what you're gonna
asked.
ask.
And it's, when are you coming back to doing videos? Or are you coming back, and if so,
That's
when?
what I was gonna cover next anyway, so that's good. So if you watched my last review, not review, that wasn't even a review, but if you watched my last retirement video, I pretty much said that the formal reviews are over, and I can't make this a full-time job, even though sometimes I wish. Although yeah, I don't think that reviews are going to be coming back. But what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of behind the scenes. Resolve it. If you don't already know, Resolve and I talk quite a bit. I message Chrono quite a bit, but I'm also evaluating, like behind the scenes, a bunch of different headphones, prototypes, things like that. I'm trying to help the manufacturers. So even though you won't see me probably on YouTube doing public facing reviews and work, I'm still doing for free, 100% free, because I get to listen to new headphones. But I don't need to be paid for that. That's that's enjoyment for me, from a bunch of your favorite brands. So I'm providing a lot of manufacturer feedback right now, which is actually what I always wanted to do. As an engineer, I'm not good at public facing uh, aspects of the hobby at all. That's what I like to say. And so, even if you won't see me on my channel, I might stream randomly somewhere. I don't know, but I don't think there will be any like formal reviews anymore. But I'm still trying to contribute positively to the hobby, and help out manufacturers if they want my opinion on what their thing is. So that's all it is. As long as I don't make all the headphones sound the same. I'm so sorry. Well, I think the thing is, it's within, like, each manufacturer, I think, has some ideas of what they want it to sound like. And so, within that,
Right.
within that realm. But
We got,
yeah,
we got
I don't think reviews are going to be coming back. Sorry, guys.
the Metal571 target curve. It's
Yeah,
now
which
more popular
just
than the.
so happened to be the Odyssey target, which is pretty
Mm,
funny. I had no idea that they had had the same thoughts. Like, yeah, Harman's a little too shouty, and the bass is a little too much, so we take off of both of those. What? It's like, wait, you literally just described, like, so
well,
that's why,
certainly
like,
the 2018 bass.
yeah,
Is just crazy.
but I'm not even talking about LCDs. Those things are
Oh,
not even close to their target, which is funny. Weirdly, like the Mobius, the first time I put it on, I'm like,
right.
did somebody like get into my head and figure out my target curve without knowing they that this was it? Because this is
Yeah.
so close. Like the Mobius is, and the sign is very, very good too.
Right.
Like things like that, which
Hmm.
weirdly is not their big
And I
open
suppose
mics, but
LCD1, with Reveal
LCD
Plus.
one is pretty lacking in the bass
Hmm.
amount. But yeah, it is closer to my curve than the big stuff, the big
Yeah.
LCDs. I think is what I call them. But yeah, so that's what I'm doing now instead
Yeah.
of YouTube.
Yeah. Definitely. Um, Anyways, that does it for the stream, guys. We've been going on for a couple hours now. Sorry we weren't able to get Gary on, but we'll try and get that at some point in the future and make sure that his
Yeah, I have
internet's
to
working.
reschedule that
We'll have to
because
reschedule that because that's a very
should be
interesting
fun.
conversation as well. Yeah. But in any case, thanks to everybody for tuning in, and thanks for your questions. And a huge thank you, of course, to Metal571 for joining. It's always a pleasure, man. Love to have you on.
Hey, pleasure is mine too.
Alrighty, guys.